This is Katie Anderson, and I'm here together with Gretchen Micklitsch to talk about Division III sports. Gretchen is a former teammate of mine from Duke University. We played soccer together. We were a member of the very first recruiting class at Duke. And she is also an assistant volunteer coach at Oberlin College in Ohio. And she's also a parent of a Division III soccer player at St. Louis, at Washington University in St. Louis. So she has offered to join us today and talk about Division III sports from multiple perspectives, both as a parent and as an assistant coach. And so thank you, Gretchen, for joining us.
Sure, no problem.
Great. Okay, so I have a couple of questions for you. And the first is really from a recruiting perspective. As an assistant coach at a D3 school, how do you divide up, you are one of a few coaches on the staff. So how do you guys divide up your duties in terms of recruiting?
Well, it's different at every school because every school has a little bit different situation. For example, some Division III schools don't even have assistants, or the head coach might be part-time, or they might have an assistant that's part-time. So not the head coach part-time, the assistant is part-time. So it's different. But in my situation, we split up the duties where, because of what our budget was, it was hard for two coaches to go to a recruiting event. So we would look at our calendar for the year and all of the events that we would want to go to recruit at, and we would kind of divvy them up. The only one that we would both go to was the big showcase in the fall in North Carolina. Because it was big and so spread out, we felt like two people needed to go to that one to kind of cover some ground. So we would go to that together, but otherwise we would kind of divvy them up. And then after that, the head coach at Oberlin also spent a lot of time recruiting at camps. So in our situation, because of where Oberlin is located in Ohio, we used to have an ID camp, but we don't anymore because it was really hard to get kids from so far away to fly out to, from California, for example, or the East Coast, to fly into Oberlin in the summer for an ID camp. And most people try to maybe combine college visits together, and there's really not much else around Oberlin. So what our head coach started doing is he attends these camps called exact camps, and they're all over the country. And he basically goes to every single one in the summer. So he's all over the place. And that was a big recruiting tool that he attended. So that was basically how we split them up.
Okay, great. And then once a student athlete makes contact with you, or you're interested in that, do the conversations tend to happen primarily with the head coach, or are those also divided up among the staff?
Divided. I would say whoever like, so for example, if I was contacted by a player who was going to be at a certain showcase and I was the one that saw them play, we would mostly maintain the relationship until it got to a certain point. Our head coach was really the expert in the finances. And so when it got to those conversations with the parents, a lot of times it would switch over to speaking with him. But we kind of split those duties until it got to a certain point of interest on both parts, that then he would kind of take it over.
Okay, that's great to know. And I would imagine that on most Division III teams, again, depending on how many people you have on the staff, that sort of divide and conquer approach is probably how it goes most of the time.
Very much, yes.
Okay. How many recruits would you say, do you prefer for them to contact you directly, or if you had to split between the people that contacted you directly versus those that you discovered at a showcase tournament, or, do you use online recruiting services as a tool for recruiting?
Yeah, we really don't use the recruiting services at all. And matter of fact, and I can't really explain why this is, but when we get an email from one of the recruiting services, we tend to prioritize that lower than when people are contacting us directly. We just prefer that. We really discover most of our players through people that contact us, because if you're expressing an interest in a school like Oberlin, we know that you're probably at a certain academic level, that you know what Oberlin is, you have an interest. It's more worth our while to spend time on people that have shown an interest. Now, we have discovered people by just seeing them on the field, but for example, when I go to a showcase and you get your rosters of the teams that you're watching, I always appreciate it when the teams list their GPAs, for example, because then I can look and I pretty much can tell right off the bat who might be and who might not be a good fit for Oberlin. And so it's really hard for me when I have no academic information and I'm just watching people. I mean, I have no idea. So I could like someone and they would not have an interest in Oberlin at all because academically it's not a good fit for them. So yeah, we prefer when people reach out, but we have discovered people, just on the field and reached out to them. But I would say that's a small percentage.
Okay. And do you ever, when you say discover them on the field, if you've got a list of kids that have contacted you in advance of a showcase tournament and you're standing there watching their team, you're watching those kids, have you ever then picked up another kid you weren't expecting even on the other team when you're just, standing there observing?
Sure, for sure. So when I'm watching a game, usually I'm at a game to watch someone who's contacted us. And then I'm watching all the players. So I'll take notes on players on both teams and I'll reach out to them. So yeah, I do spend a lot of time reaching out to players who have not contacted us, but the return on that is quite small, but it does happen. It occasionally happen. And then if there are times in my schedule where I'm not watching a player, that has contacted us, I'll look for just games in the appropriate age group, maybe teams that I know that we've had other players from before that I might go look at and watch.
Okay. And also I'm curious from an age perspective, given that Division III doesn't have the same sort of limitations that Division I and to some extent Division II have, how early in the process are you sort of forming your teams by age group? I mean, are you already recruiting? Are you in contact with kids that are younger than junior year?
I mean, a lot of kids will contact us because, once an athlete gets to high school and they kind of are learning, okay, you have to email college coaches, we'll get emails from freshmen and we basically tell freshmen that we aren't going to spend our time watching them at this point because we just we have no idea if academically we need to see a little bit more information on them. If we have time, we will. If there's a break in the schedule and I have no one else to see and a freshman has contacted us and said they're very interested, we'll definitely go watch them. And it's really the same with a sophomore. We start reaching out to sophomores a little bit more if we see someone playing their in the spring of their sophomore year.
Okay.
But then junior year is really the year where we're doing our most recruiting. However, I will say that we have had several players come to our school who really didn't know that until their senior year. So maybe they thought they wanted to play Division I, and then while going through the recruiting process realized that Division III was going to be a better fit for them, or maybe they weren't getting the interest from Division I coaches, and so now they're looking at Division III schools. And one of the reasons why we send 2 coaches to that showcase in North Carolina in November, I believe it's in November, is because we actually go there because there are a lot of uncommitted seniors.
Right.
And so the timing is right where we can go. And if we can find someone who's uncommitted, who still wants to play, we can get everything in order. We can get them to apply to Oberlin before the deadline. So. Right.
Yeah. And what happens, okay, so talking about deadlines, what happens if you discover a player who has missed the application deadline? Do you have any way to deal with that kind of student?
Yeah, we have had a few situations where we're able to get the deadline extended. I mean, it's really a case-by-case thing, but it is possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I would imagine it would have to be a very specific case.
It's not easy, but if someone is really, really interested, then we can work on that.
Okay, great. Let's see, if you could tell us a little bit about unofficial visits at your school, and I guess, in contrast to official visits, what does a typical unofficial visit look like in terms of what you do with your players? And also, as a D3 school, do you have the budget to support official visits, which are ones that you pay for?
Right.
Which D1 schools often, that's kind of part of the D1 experience, is getting invited by the coach and having that paid for. But does Oberlin or do many? I mean, again, you can speak for a lot of Division III schools who may or may not have those budgets.
Well, typically, what happens is if we find someone who's interested in Oberlin, and the kids that are interested in Oberlin are from all over the country, so they need to come and be on campus to see if this is where they want to be. So we try to get them to come out their junior year, and that is an unofficial visit. They need to get themselves out there, but we will host them once they get there, so they will stay with someone on the team. We can pay for, I think we can pay for up to 2 meals. We have the budget for that. And we encourage them to come. There's a time at Oberlin in February that's they're called junior visit days. And we really like people to come during that time because the school itself has tons of stuff planned for people who are interested in learning more about the school and activities and events. And so it's great for us because then if they come in during that time, they're pretty much their whole day is planned. And then what we'll do is we'll squeeze in, so if we know they're interested in a particular area, we'll find someone on the team who takes those classes and they can sit in on a class with them. Then they'll have the evening with the team member that they're staying with and hopefully meeting other people on the team.
Okay. Do they get to attend class? You said attend classes, and do you take into account what their academic interests are in terms of being able to help drive that part of it?
Yeah, for sure. So if they're interested in something, if they wanted to be in neuroscience, we'll send them to a math and science class with one of our team members. So yeah, we definitely do that. Sometimes people don't want to stay with someone. Maybe they're coming in with their parent and the parent has a hotel room at this nice hotel they have in Oberlin, and they say, oh, I'd rather stay in the hotel room. So what we'll do is we'll still schedule their day, and maybe we'll schedule a lunch with several members on the team so they can meet the team. They usually, they meet with us. We give them a tour of the facilities. So all of that is what the unofficial visits usually are. Then at that point, we don't really have official visits. Usually at that point, they are able to make a decision. If they've visited the campus, they've met the team, they've met us, they've done a tour, they've seen the athletic facilities. At that point, they usually decide if they want to apply or not. Occasionally, when someone's admitted, and I'm sure we'll get to this a little bit later, but if they haven't applied early decision and they apply regular decision and now they're trying to make a decision, occasionally we'll have someone come back to do another visit to make up their mind, but that's pretty rare.
Okay. Great. Okay, and then how early do you start asking? I mean, I guess you maybe addressed this a little bit earlier in terms of asking about academics, in terms of transcripts and test scores. And how early do you start asking families about where they stand financially in terms of the FAFSA and financial need? For example, do you ask them to fill out the FAFSA forecaster or something to get an indication of where that family stands?
Well, from the financial standpoint, this wasn't really my area, so I can't speak to it in depth, but I do know that one of the first steps that we would take is have the family go on to the Oberlin website. There's a net price calculator,
right,
which they can do to at least see if they're somewhere in the ballpark, and then usually the head coach would take it from there. So I, from my perspective, that was kind of all that I was responsible for, is letting people know that. But in terms of getting their academic information, basically as soon as they had a test score, we wanted to know what it was. So we would say, let us know as soon as you get your scores, because that was a pretty good indicator for us, what their, if they would be a good fit for the school.
Right. Does Oberlin ask for SAT subject tests? I didn't look. No. Okay. I know that one tends to be a bit of maybe you can speak to that with your daughter, because that one tends to be the surprise kicker when the family realizes that the school is going to ask for SAT subject tests, and they were on top of their SAT and ACT, but they totally forgot about or didn't realize that they needed that other thing too.
Yeah, no, we really only require one or the other. So people usually just submit either their ACT score or their SAT score. There's nothing outside of that.
Okay. And then do you have someone in the admissions department and maybe someone in the financial aid department who are sort of liaisons with your team in terms of being the point person to review? Like, can you get a pre-read on a candidate's transcripts and test scores to get that initial feedback?
Yeah, they will do that, especially if someone has shown a lot of interest and they want to apply early decision. We will do a pre-read for them.
Okay.
So we work pretty closely with the admissions department. And our head coach has a really good relationship with them, and they're in constant contact, especially as it gets towards the application deadlines and the acceptance dates so they work very closely together. Yeah.
Right. So my next question is about something that was actually in the news quite a bit yesterday. But interestingly, so the question is really, does a head coach have pull in admissions? And the reason that that's a really, really important question right now is because of what happened yesterday. Came out in the news that there's this big college admissions scandal, and this guy, an independent counselor, had managed to pull together a scheme where one piece of it was bribing a few college coaches to basically pull a student into the school with a fake admissions profile or a fake athletic profile, basically, to say that they were student athletes when they weren't. But using that little kind of loophole that exists within the Division I world, where a coach can have an influence over requesting that a student attend the school, would that ever even have happened? I mean, do the D3 coaches have any level of kind of pull in the admissions department?
I would say not much at all. I mean, it's completely different, and the stories coming out of the Division I schools are shocking. What we tell people is that we can support your application, and all that really means is that admissions is aware that you are a soccer recruit or whatever your sport is, that you're a recruit. So they're aware, and that's just part of your application file. But we really don't have pull. I mean, we've had plenty of people that we're recruiting not get into the school.
Right.
So, that you really need to get in on your own merit. Again, they're aware that you're a recruit, and that might just be another thing on your application that is attractive to them in general. But yeah, we don't really have any kind of pull, if you want to call it.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that you use the phrase, "we'll support your application," because I had a parent just the other day say that to me. So, well, this coach said that they're going to support us. And I tried to explain to her that, well, at a Division III school, that term is very different than it is at a Division I school. And you cannot expect that coach has actually got any influence at all. All it means is they've flagged your application. So
yes, good way to say it. Even though we both say support, it means totally different things.
Totally different things. Right. Okay. Well, that's great. That's an important point of clarity. Okay. Are there things, if a coach really, really wants a player to come to your school, are there any other things that coach can do to encourage the player to come to Oberlin versus somewhere else?
Well, for us, it's really getting the kids on campus. I mean, we feel like we have a unique school, a great college town. We explain to people that while it's a college town, it kind of feels like you're in the middle of nowhere. I mean, we're a half hour from the Cleveland airport. mean, we have kids going downtown to watch Indians games and Cavs games and all that stuff. So you're close to a metropolitan area, but you still have that college town experience. We have a music conservatory on campus. Oberlin has a music conservatory, and music is a big part of campus life. So lots of live performances in all genres. So it's really an interesting place to be, and we feel like we need to get people on campus. So we were talking about the unofficial visits before. We host a ton of kids, probably more than the average school, because we invite a lot of people to come visit, and our poor teammates, the girls on the team, are hosting all the time. But we feel that if we can get people on campus and they can see our facilities are great, like our game field, we have a grass game field that is really, really nice. And we feel like if we can get people on campus and they see our facilities and the school and the town, then it really makes a big difference for us.
Right. Well, okay, so on the subject of, programs that are strong on your campus and what kids can study, can an athlete coming to your school really say, like, this is what I want to study? Are there any limitations on what a coach might say to a student athlete who says they want to study the sciences, or, something that's maybe heavy on labs, or
never tell somebody they couldn't study what they wanted to study. So the way it works at Oberlin, and I'm sure it's different at every school, but there's a time frame in the late afternoon where there are no classes. So we know that when we have practice at 5, that no one's going to be missing anything. So, and if there are classes offered during that time, there's another section of that class that's available. So there would never be something that someone couldn't take because it conflicted with practice. So yeah, we would never do that. We do know that academics take a priority. So for example, we had a starter a few years ago that had a geology field trip, and she wanted to go on her geology field trip, and it was important for her grade, and she went, even though she was a starter, and we missed her a lot, but that was the priority for her.
Right.
We've also done things like where someone had a field trip, and we were on the bus on our way to a game, and we met her and picked her up halfway and took her to the game with us. So we know that you're there for academics, and while the team and your sport are very important, we know that school's the most important thing.
Great. Okay. Well, that's a lot of what I try to emphasize with families, and sometimes that the reality of those situations, like, that doesn't actually hit them as a junior or a senior. It takes until they're actually an athlete in a program, realizing what constraints might be put on them, right, until they realize what, how that practically plays out in their lives. And wow, I didn't realize you were going to tell me I couldn't do this thing because.
Yeah. I used to coach at the high school level, and I coached at a really a large all-girls high school, and many of my players went to play Division I. And I remember people telling me they would be on recruiting trips, and a coach would say to them, well, I hope you weren't planning on being a nurse, because you can't if you're going to play soccer.
Right.
Or something along those lines.
Right.
That's a lot. So.
Okay. Let's see. In terms of the application, having an early, do you guys have early decision at Oberlin?
Yeah, we actually have ED1 and ED2.
Okay.
We have two early decision.
How does that play out, again, from a coaching saying, okay, you student athlete, I really want you to come to Oberlin. I really ask all my students to apply early decision. Do you even offer early action?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. So that's, the answer is either ED or regular decision.
Right.
Does he try to encourage as many kids as possible to apply early decision to kind of lock in those spots and get kids committed to the team?
We do, because as with most schools, the acceptance rate for early decision applicants is a little bit better. Mm-hmm. So especially if there's any question about whether or not they'll be admitted, we always encourage people to go early decision because you have a better chance of getting in. So, and we do like to know who's coming sooner than later. So we really do encourage people to go early decision one. Now, if someone has their heart set on another school and maybe their dream is to go to Harvard or whatever, and they play early decision to Harvard and they don't get in, we also have an early decision too, that they can go through that process. And that's typically how most of our players go. But we do have some regular decision people every year. So yeah, we never really know what our final roster is until pretty late.
Okay.
But yeah, we encourage early decision as much as we can.
Okay. Now, when it comes to finding the balance that the Division III really promotes, do your kids have you talked about taking field trips and doing that kind of thing. What about things like study abroad or having a job or doing internships or anything that would take up extra time that I think a Division I athlete maybe would not necessarily have the freedom to pursue? What kind of opportunities do Division III athletes have?
Well, in my opinion, this is one of the best things about playing in a Division III school. You can have a balance. So on our team, we have girls who have jobs. We have girls who we had several girls that worked for the newspaper. One was an editor. We had a girl she was in one of the art programs at Oberlin. She had her own art studio. We have girls that everybody pretty much studies abroad their junior year. Not everybody, but almost all of them study abroad. We had girls that did other sports. So we had several girls that were on the track team. So you're able to do 2 sports if you want to. So it really is I think of it as a good way to transition into real life after college. Because if you're playing a collegiate sport, you've probably been playing your sport all year round, almost every day for a long time.
Right.
And now you're in college and your season is still going to be crazy. So your season is your season, in my opinion, whether it's Division I, II, or III. You have practice every day. You have your games. I mean, your season is still going to be intense. It's the non-traditional season or the off season that is where the real differences come in.
Right.
So while they are still working out and staying fit and they have a short spring season, they're really able to do a lot of other things. They can participate in Greek life if that's something they're interested in. They can volunteer. They can do other things. And that's what's been really great. And yeah, that on our team, we had girls involved in all kinds of things.
That's so great. That's something that I think, when you and I were players at Duke, I think we had that was the late 80s, and we had a lot of flexibility to participate in the things that we wanted to do, right? But that is not the case for kids today. So, and I think that's probably one of the best selling points of Division III athletics. So
sure.
Great. Okay, so if we can switch gears a little bit into you as a parent with your daughter, who's a soccer player at Washington University in St. Louis. Would you say that your daughter's own recruiting experience, did she look at Division I schools? I mean, again, you kind of mentioned that some of the kids who are coming to Oberlin are definitely, looking at D1, they're looking at D3, they kind of, they're trying to see where their opportunities are. Did your daughter have a similar experience, or did she just go straight for the Division III route?
No, she had a similar experience. I mean, I think these kids, if they're playing club sports at a high level, they're all kind of brainwashed that they need to play Division I. So that was her mindset going into high school. When you start going to these showcase events and, I got to email these coaches. So, and she had a little bit of interest, but I think as she was getting further and further into high school, and she was doing very well academically and realizing that maybe some of her interests were more academic, I think that's when she realized that maybe to go to the type of academic school that she wanted to go to and play her sport, that it would need to be at a Division III school. And for her, she actually kind of zeroed in pretty early on WashU. And so it was kind of nice because she knew that she wanted to go there pretty early on. So she kind of knew where to focus her energy.
Okay.
And that's where she focused most of her energy. So she went to the camps and she was in contact with the coach and showed an extreme interest. And I know for me as a coach, you appreciate that. If you know someone really wants to come to your school and they're showing interest and they're in touch a lot and they're sending you things and keeping you updated, I mean, that makes a big difference.
Right.
So.
Okay. Well, that's great advice and great, to hear that, for those kids who do zero in on that early, that can, make a difference.
Yeah.
Does she have friends that went Division I? Does she hear their stories and the difference in their experience that they're having in their freshman year?
She does. She played on a club team all during high school that has some very successful players on it that went on to play at big college programs. And when they all got together over the holidays and were kind of swapping stories, and she said, "Oh, I'm going to go back early and rush." And they said, "You're rushing? You're going to be in a sorority?" They couldn't believe it, I mean, they're having wonderful experiences because they're in part of great programs, right. But it's a lot different. I mean, they started their spring season right when they got back and they're practicing and it was, it's just different. And Emily's really happy with her decision.
Great. And so does she have, she's an engineering, she's kind of decided to go the engineering route, which is, I know, a heavy duty, the labs are long, it's a huge academic commitment.
Right.
Has that at any point in this year caused a conflict for her, or has she managed to be able to work through whatever challenges?
No, it's been fine. I mean, she juggles a lot, but her coach is very supportive of the girls, and especially during the season, if there are things that they have to miss because they travel. He has formed good relationships with all the professors, so he knows who needs to do what, and he's proctored many exams on the road in a hotel room or something like that. But no, it's the school and the coaches are very supportive of what this student's academic goals are. So right. It's been great.
Okay. Is she thinking about doing study abroad or internships or any of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, she would like to study abroad in the spring of her junior year, for sure. She's already, scoping out what her options are. So yeah, that's definitely part of the plan. And internships, we're not sure yet. This summer, she's coming home after her freshman year, and she's probably gonna have the same job that she did last summer. Various things. She worked in a restaurant and helped coach some camps and stuff like that. So she's thinking she's going to have one more summer doing things like that. But then the summer after her sophomore year, she would like to plan on getting an internship during the summer. So okay. Not during the school year, but during the summer.
Okay. As her parent, it seems like you're pretty happy with how things have gone for her. Is there anything you would have changed about, the way her recruiting experience went, or did you feel like everything went pretty smoothly and she obviously ended up in a happy place? So.
Right. Yeah, no, everything for her, it was nerve-wracking waiting for the acceptance decision, knowing whether or not she got in, but it's like that for any student applying to a highly selective academic school. I mean, you're on pins and needles waiting for that answer. So that was probably the worst part of it. But the process was good for her. And again, I think a lot of it is because that she knew early. And I know that's not the case for everyone. Right. She did know early, and for us, that meant a little bit less travel in terms of having to go visit a ton of different schools and all of that. So it did make it a little bit easier. But okay. I would recommend to people, even if they're looking at different schools all over the place, depending on what your if you can do it or not, it's really important to get on campus. You gotta go check out the school, check out the team, check out the coaches, spend some time there, and see if you feel comfortable there.
Great. Well, is there anything else, just to kind of wrap things up, is there anything else you would want to tell college counselors about, Division III as a whole? Any other advice or important insight you'd like to share?
The only thing I would say is just to consider Division III schools for athletics. A lot of people just automatically say, oh, well, we were hoping for a scholarship, and if they're not getting money to play a sport, then they automatically write off, well, then I just won't play my sport. Whereas, you can play your sport at a very high level at a Division III school. There are ways to get financial aid other ways. You just have to work with the coach in their financial aid office. There are other ways to get aid. It does not have to be an athletic scholarship. So, I would just say don't automatically rule it out. Consider Division III schools. There are tons of great schools all around. Small, there are teeny tiny ones. There are ones that are not so teeny tiny. They're all shapes and sizes, and that people should really investigate playing a sport at a D3 school, because it really is it's a great experience. They call it the D3 experience. It's a great experience. Yeah. So you can really have a balance.
Well, thank you so much for spending the time to share your professional insight and also insight as a parent. Hopefully, it will encourage some my colleagues to really get a deeper understanding of what that's like, because I think that for at least college counselors who aren't as experienced with college athletics, they kind of lump D1, D2. They don't understand the nuanced difference between the divisions. Right. And I think D3 is such a special group of colleges that I know that it's just a different situation. The minute, like you said, that families hear there's no athletic scholarship, they automatically write it off, and that is not at all what this is about. So thank you. I so appreciate it. It was great to chat with you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.